This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm Matt Addison with Paul Gorst and David Lynch alongside me. We'll be looking back at Brighton and ahead to Manchester City shortly, with Liverpool's title chances at best hanging in the balance. We'll pick our teams for Sunday's game as well at the end of the show and of course make our score predictions, but plenty of things to discuss before then. Gorsty, I'll come to you first, and we will touch on that 1-0 defeat midweek against Brighton shortly with reference to what that means for Manchester City. But first of all, both Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola have been speaking ahead of the game today, and it seems the Manchester City boss has had a little bit of a pop at Klopp.
He has, yeah. He's done that typical Pep Guardiola fashion where it's very passive-aggressive and very sarcastic. And sometimes when it's written down, it doesn't always come across as though he's having a dig. But when you actually watched the footage of it, he really did seem to take umbrage with a suggestion from Klopp that Manchester City's COVID issues have led to them having a couple of weeks off. I must admit, I'm not too sure where and when that 2 weeks was. Don't know whether it was just a bit of an off-the-cuff comment from Klopp and it looks like it's inadvertently come back on him. But Guardiola certainly wasn't happy with it. And he was saying, oh no, Jurgen's got it wrong. It wasn't 2 weeks, it was 2 months, it was 3 months, it was 4 months. Clearly just playing up to it and hamming it all up. And the mask has slipped a little bit, hasn't it? You know, we noticed that last season when the two teams played in the November game at Anfield and the build-up to that one. The two managers are normally at pains to express how much they respect each other and how much kind of admiration they have for each other's work, and that is true. There's no question about that. But sometimes in the build-up to the games, the as I say, the mask does slip, and we had Guardiola accusing Mane of being a diver, and Mane actually stopped in the mix zone for one of the games previous to that game, and you could tell he had something on his mind that he wanted to say about that, and it just provided that game with a little bit more spice, and maybe events in respective press conferences today have added a little bit more to Sunday's game. From a Liverpool perspective, probably needs that, if we're honest. I think Liverpool, for the most part now, in their minds at least, are fighting for fourth only. So something a little bit extra for them to take onto the pitch, and something for the fans to kind of rally behind, because I think it's a bit of a feeling of deflation amongst the fan base when you realise that you're fighting and you're cheering on for a team who are just looking to finish, between second and fourth. So, it was a pretty uneventful press conference from Jurgen Klopp today, apart from that one line which seems to have riled up plenty in the Manchester corner.
Yeah, it's all mind games, isn't it, David? It's one of those things going into these matches. I think Liverpool have had an 8-day break this season already. That's what Manchester City had because of the COVID issues, if I'm correct in my maths. It doesn't seem like Jurgen Klopp has a point, and it kind of seems like Pep Guardiola had every right to have a pop back. But of course, it just adds to the excitement ahead of Sunday.
Yeah, I'm not particularly sure why Jurgen's gone down that route, to be honest. I don't think that, to be fair, that COVID break that City had, obviously they wouldn't have chosen to have that. And obviously, and I do think it did them a favour ahead of, obviously it was the Chelsea away game, wasn't it? And they came out and they absolutely walloped Chelsea, and they were great in that game. So I do think in that, ahead of that game particularly, did do them a favour slightly. But to be fair, I think in terms of trying to say that that's why they've got the advantage they have, and it's been a huge part of their season, I don't think that's entirely fair. They're a club who had to compete without having a proper pre-season because they're going deeper in Europe, and I don't think that's particularly helpful. I think that's something that Klopp, if it happened to Liverpool, would have spoken about that an awful lot, and more than we've maybe heard from Guardiola about it. So that's massively affected their preparation. I think City's big advantage is the fact that they've got such a massive squad. I don't think you can sort of discount that, and I think that has been possibly their major advantage in this season, and we'll probably see them through to winning the title. But yeah, don't really think Klopp had a point on that one. I think Guardiola was probably well within his rights really to sort of hit back, and I suppose he could have also pointed out that Klopp, a couple of players he lost in meaningless games, didn't he? I'm thinking Midtjylland and stuff like that. So I don't think anyone's got the moral high ground on this one basically, and I think it does add a little bit of spice to it. You don't really want managers to be best mates. You don't necessarily want them to be sort of Mourinho levels of antagonising others, but maybe a little bit of spice in there makes it interesting. So I'm sure they'll probably have a word about that before or after the match.
Yeah, I think the Brighton result as well, Gorst, we do have to sort of touch on that. That makes things interesting as well heading into this weekend. Is the title completely over for Liverpool, or is there any sort of glimmer of hope that you can see? Maybe if they win this, maybe there's still something in it for them?
It entirely depends on your outlook, doesn't it? I must admit, I thought after that defeat, and I wrote as much in the match verdict, that it's pretty much gone now, hasn't it? If you think that City go to Anfield on Sunday at a time when Liverpool are struggling for confidence, struggling with injuries, as they always seem to be, and they haven't got any fans in there to kind of drag them over the line. So City will be licking their lips at the prospect of a first win at Anfield since 2003, would you believe, when Nicolas Anelka scored the winning goal. And if City win that, it is curtains. You'd have to say that City would go 10 points clear and still have a game in hand, and no team is clawing that back, let's be honest. So it's not so much a make or break game, but it's certainly a break game, if you like. Liverpool can give the title hopes a massive shot in the arm with a win to take it to 4 points, but then City have still got that cushion of the game in hand, haven't they? And the form that they've been in, you wouldn't bet against them for that game in hand. So for me, Liverpool, I just have to, as Jurgen Klopp says, he says we can't really think about where we're going to end up in May. It's just about winning the games now and seeing where we land, or seeing if we're in with a shot with a few weeks to go, or, just kind of just get your head down and crack on and see where you are in a couple of months. But from looking at it from the outside, you have to say that it is City's to lose now, and Liverpool just can't afford to slip out of this top four, because that could have huge ramifications for the next 2 or 3 years with regards to recruiting the right level of player that you need to go and win that title again. Because I think once everyone's fit and firing again for Liverpool, in the distant future, then Liverpool would probably consider themselves title favourites again. I think they proved it when they didn't have too many injuries last season, that they're capable of, being the best team in the land. And I think for me, the focus would just be on making sure that they are inside that top four at the end of May.
Before I ask you the same question on the title chances, David, let me tell you that before Chelsea won last night, as the top seven looked, Manchester City had played 5 games against those teams. They hadn't won any of them. And when you look at their run-in, it's much more difficult than Liverpool's. As David Hughes points out on the Analysing Anfield podcast to come out on Sunday, you look at their run-in, they've got Tottenham, Everton, Arsenal, West Ham and Manchester United. Those are their next 5 games. Those are really, really tough. Chelsea and Everton again, Aston Villa, Leicester. Manchester City have slipped up in these big games before, and I suppose that is something that can give Liverpool a bit of hope, but they then have to hold up their side of the bargain as well.
Yeah, that actually could make things interesting. I didn't really sort of realise how difficult their next few really is. So that does make things tricky for them. I think Liverpool's issue is getting close to putting the pressure on by finding consistency in their own results, and it's just not there at the moment. And I think that's possibly not something we'll see for the remainder of the season, to be honest. I think we'll see possibly a slight uptick in terms of if you consistently get Mane, Fabinho, Alisson back in this next game, hopefully. That's a big contribution to the quality levels of the team. Getting Diogo Jota back as soon as possible is massive for me, for the extra threat he provides off the bench, or just to give you a rotational option to keep your forwards fresh. If that happens quickly enough, maybe Liverpool could, and obviously if Liverpool win on Sunday, then maybe they can sort of slightly get themselves back in the mix. But I do think, possibly being realistic about it, there's a real chance that we'll look back on this season and realise that the title chances sort of went up in smoke the moment that Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez both got injured around similar time and got season-ending injuries. I think that's possibly how we'll reflect on that period. Is the point at which Liverpool's title chances went, which is a shame, but they can't be thinking like that at the moment. They basically got to think that giving City a bloody nose and proving that they're not finished yet is important, but so is the 3 points in terms of making sure they don't get dragged out of the top 4 and start having to do any chasing and things like that. So so it's still a massive game regardless of what it means, even if it isn't ultimately a title decider. And Liverpool really they have to think about getting the points for the top 4 hopes, even if City steam through that difficult run.
Yeah, you mentioned Diogo Jota there, and Gorsty, the last time a player came off the bench for Liverpool and really changed the game, it was Jota all the way back in October, really, against West Ham. We saw Curtis Jones come off the bench last week away at West Ham, but the game was sort of already in the ascendancy for Liverpool at that point. And I suppose that is the difficulty, isn't it? Even if Manchester City slip up, Liverpool are not necessarily in a run of form at the moment, where if they go a goal behind, you ever feel like they're going to turn that around.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the most disappointing thing from a Liverpool perspective this season is, even for all the injuries and setbacks that they've had it in their hands at a number of occasions and seem to have just not been able to take that big step forward. When I go back to the Aston Villa game, and I think if Liverpool would have won that, they'd have gone 8 points clear of City. And the Brighton game, if they'd have held on an extra couple of minutes, that's a big 3 points on a tough day. And there's just been too many of those occasions where it looks like they've looked to take the step forward and they haven't been able to. And I think that is what ultimately has cost them, like Lynch says, with Gomez and Van Dijk as well, of course. I mean, you look at it on Sunday, if one of either Kabak or Davies plays, then Liverpool will be naming their 13th different centre-back partnership already this season, which is incredible, really. That just underlines where the problems have been. And in such a crucial area of the pitch, you're probably not going to win a title if you're having to chop and change it as much as Jurgen Klopp has had to do, particularly with the players who've come in to replace them, players who don't even play centre-back, players who've never played senior football before. It's just been a massive kind of knock-on effect. And to an extent, I think Liverpool will probably have to be quite proud that they're still in the top four with all the issues that they've had. But yeah, I mean, to have any kind of realistic chance, you do need 3 points on Sunday. It's not a case of avoiding defeat. You need to go there and win, or welcome City to Anfield and win. And even then, that's there's still quite a fair way back, even if they do win on Sunday. So it's all eggs are in the Champions League basket for now, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's been a difficult time of late, hasn't it, David, in terms of Anfield matches and getting points on the board at home. But that has to change for Liverpool at some point. I mean, the big thing for me heading into this one is if Liverpool had beaten Burnley and then beaten Brighton, which you'd imagine they have the capabilities of doing, they'd only be a point behind, wouldn't they? And albeit Manchester City have got that game in hand, but it would just put them in such a different mindset going into this one.
Yeah, would have changed everything. And I think, that just sums up sort of, how disappointing it is to be dropping points at home, because it's been so long for Liverpool that they've been on that ridiculous run of not losing games and winning most of them at Anfield. So to lose to two, bottom half of the table sides, two sides who are fighting relegation this season, is just, it seems mad. But I think a lot of it, comes back to what we've talked about, which is the injury problems and the difference between early Klopp, which was a side that still dropped points at Anfield and still struggled against lower half teams, and the team that we've seen over the last couple of seasons is the sprinkling of world-class quality that they added in the summers in between. And basically you take out those players and you start getting similar results to, around 2016, 2017. So it's perhaps no surprise that this is happening. The hope is that they start getting a few of these players back now, and we get back on track and see another winning run or another run of undefeated games. And also I think it probably helps as well that Manchester City are going to come to Anfield with a very different plan to Burnley and Brighton. You could sort of throw a blanket over their defensive structure for almost 90 minutes. Although I thought Brighton was slightly more adventurous, I still think you looked at a lot of the time it was very deep defending and closing spaces. And City are going to be a lot more open than that. And I think, you'd hope maybe City sort of smell blood a little bit and think they can get one over on Liverpool and get a bit lax in terms of opening up a little bit. And if Liverpool have got Mane back and then you've got Salah and Firmino obviously fit, then there's a real chance that they could kill them on the counter. So, hopefully there's a bit of complacency from City's side.
Yeah, I think it was 8 players missing Gorsty midweek. I think 6 of those automatically would go into Liverpool's first choice team. There's an argument to be had there over Naby Keita as well. Is it fair to say that it is purely injuries just catching up with Liverpool at this point in time?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as you mentioned, 8 injuries. I think that there's been 6 different games where Liverpool have had as many as 8 players injured. And I've seen a stat the other day that suggested that as many as 6 have been unavailable for over 2/3 of the season, which is just incredible when you think about it. Liverpool on Wednesday night were without Alisson, obviously Sadio Mane, Van Dijk and Gomez and Matip, whoever you think is Liverpool's first choice centre-back partnership, they're unavailable for Klopp for the rest of the season now. Naby Keita, just, it's news when he's fit rather than when he's injured nowadays, isn't it? Just so many problems stacking up. Diogo Jota still out for another 2 or 3 weeks, according to Jurgen Klopp. So it's just been quite remarkable, really. On top of that as well, when Liverpool really need their supporters to rouse them and drag them out of a sticky spot, then they're just not there. They're not able to do that. And I think the most frustrating thing about Wednesday night was you seen it coming. After half an hour, I remember looking at the monitor next to me at Anfield, and I think it's at 33 minutes on the clock, and I just thought, this has just got the writing on the wall here. That's either going to be 0-0 or they're going to get beaten. It's crazy because games against West Brom and Brighton and Burnley all at home. Liverpool have taken 1 point from 9 there. It's just so lamentable and frustrating, and Liverpool will be kicking themselves for what could have been when the season ends, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 8 players, just to list them off that were missing: Alisson, Van Dijk, Gomez, Matip, Fabinho, Keita, Mane and Jota. And I mean, if you compare those, David, with Manchester City or Manchester United, I mean, it's the equivalent, isn't it, of Manchester City being, say, without Edison, Diaz, Laporte, Stones, Fernandinho, Gundogan, Sterling and Mahrez. I mean, if you take those players out of any team, they would really, really be hindered by that. So it's, as much as it's frustrating, it's an explanation, I think, rather than an excuse for Liverpool.
Well, that's it. You're reeling off the players there that they would be without, even in that one game. But you're talking about, Liverpool's situation is akin to City being without Diaz, Laporte, and John Stones for the entirety of the rest of the season, having been without 2 of them since November. It's just they would not. I refuse to believe that Manchester City would be in the position they are if that had happened to them. Particularly as the season that they put in last time around with just Laporte out as their sort of major injury. I know Sane sort of sustained a knee injury as well, but he was very likely to have left for Bayern Munich by that point anyway. That was the way that was going prior to him picking that injury up. So it's just crazy, really, that Liverpool is still in this position. That they're still, inside the top 4. That they're sort of in charge of their own destiny on that front. It's impressive that they're that close to Manchester City, and fair play to them for sort of muddling through. Really, I think we probably don't make enough of that because we hold them to this ridiculous standard that they put in the last couple of years. But it is impressive, and I think Manchester United on another side, I think who wouldn't be anywhere close to where they are if they'd have had even slightly more injuries than they have this season. They've been quite fortunate really on that front, and it does help that the 2 Manchester clubs have arguably got the biggest squads in the league, I think, and they seem to be sort of finding it the easiest to get through this season. So yeah, I think we've probably got to be starting talking about what Liverpool are doing as a bit of an achievement rather than a disappointment at this stage. And particularly, if you get a win over Manchester City, then that would be sort of another feather in the cap of Jurgen Klopp, and for me just shows why he's possibly the best manager in this league.
Yeah, I mean, the same for Manchester United. It would be like taking De Gea, Maguire, Lindelof, Bailly, McTominay, Fred, Rashford and Greenwood out, which is just ripping out some of the huge players. And it does, Gorst, doesn't it, just underline the job that this Liverpool squad has done, because we don't always see Liverpool as being a team with that much squad depth, maybe compared to 1 or 2 of the other teams. But I suppose we have to give them a little bit of credit for that this season, because they've shown actually that they've done all right in that position.
Yeah, I mean, we do the columns, don't we? The columnists, and I spoke to John Aldridge for his a couple of weeks back, and the phrase he coined was Liverpool have had their spine ripped out, and I think that was pretty much on the money in terms of the players who've been unavailable to them this season. But I think again, I think that's what makes it all the more frustrating, because when Liverpool have played in big games, they've still shown up and still put in a performance. It's the games where you can normally expect quite a lot of heavy rotation where these players wouldn't necessarily be playing, that they've come a cropper in. And I think that was what has been the most disappointing thing of the season. And it's kind of why I think Sunday's game is a little bit of a blessing, because City will come out and leave gaps and spaces, and Liverpool have still got the players to exploit that, haven't they? I think, for all the disappointing form that they've shown against teams who've been content to sit in with numbers behind the ball and defend deep and try and counter, I think if teams opened up, then the fullbacks are still able to exploit that. Hopefully, Sadio Mane's back, and Mohamed Salah, as he's shown against West Ham, can still do the business. So I think, in a kind of perverse way, that this is exactly what Liverpool need on Sunday afternoon.
I suppose a couple of positives, David, are the couple of transfers that they did do on deadline day. Obviously, Ben Davies and Ozan Kabak both available for the weekend, but it's a difficult one to throw either of them into, isn't it? It's such a big game for Liverpool, but you do have to throw one or two of them in at some point. And looking at the run of fixtures for Liverpool, there isn't really any obvious game that you'd say, well, that's the one. I suppose if there was one to throw a player in, it probably would have been Brighton. Yeah,
exactly. It's a tricky one, isn't it? For if he wants to give him a debut before the end of the season, then this run doesn't look ideal at all. But he probably has to throw them into a game that you're looking at thinking that's a really tricky one. The difficult thing is obviously that both of them come with slight caveats in terms of, you're looking at Ben Davies and that's the big jump, isn't it, from the Championship, playing the Championship with Preston, albeit top end of the Championship, to come and playing for a team up against Manchester City, who are the best team in the league this season at the moment. And then obviously with Kabak, the difference there is adapting to the Premier League, the differences in the Premier League, and obviously the fact that he's been with a team that's been getting beaten most weeks and stepping up. And he's also only, he's 20 years old. You can't expect him to come in and have all this experience to call upon as he tries and adapts to a new situation. So it's really difficult. I mean, it was interesting that Klopp suggested today that it's not just training they're putting them through at the moment. It's obviously they're doing the analysis stuff with them, showing them videos of how Liverpool centre-halves should behave in this system and stuff. And I'm sure that will help them. But I don't think either of them are really sort of ready-made to sort of drop into that situation, which is a bit of a problem when you consider that they're both really short-term signings. I know with Kabak, obviously that option to make it permanent is there, but he's obviously the fact they wanted an option suggests to me that they're not entirely convinced. So Coletta Carr, for example, he's 24 years old, would have probably been one where you'd had slightly more faith in him being able to drop straight into the team. So it's a really tough one. I personally don't expect either of them to start against Manchester City, to be honest. And I think the games after that are where you start considering using one of them, because you do want to get, for example, Henderson back into midfield, or maybe even Fabinho on occasion for the rest of the season. So I think maybe this one is not the one to put them in, because it's, your defence gets a real stern examination against City, the way they pull you about and they keep the ball in the final third and stuff like that. I think it's going to be really difficult if one of them's put in.
Yeah, it's a big jump, obviously, for Ben Davies from Preston to Liverpool, Gorsty, but it's a big jump as well for Ozan Kabak, obviously coming from a Schalke team who's conceding more than 2.5 goals per game so far this season. That's obviously not down to him. It's not his fault that that's the case, but it's just a completely different system and a completely different way of playing football, isn't it?
Yeah, but he'll have to do probably less defending than you'd imagine, but I agree with Lynch about the kind of hesitancy to put in an obligation to buy into that deal. I think Liverpool normally like to do their homework on transfers, don't they, and absolutely leave no stone unturned to make sure that this guy coming in is the right one. And obviously needs must and time was of the essence, so Liverpool probably haven't been able to do that as much as they'd have liked with Ozan Kabak. So it's a loan deal with an option to buy in, and we shall see if that option is taken up. I think even at 18 million, which is probably a little bit lower because of Schalke's financial problems, I think even at that fee, Liverpool aren't necessarily in a position to just say, yes, go on, then we'll take him in the summer if they're not absolutely convinced. Because I think funds are stretched that much that they're going to need kind of every penny this summer to land someone who's going to be a mainstay of the defence for the next 5-6 years. And if Kabak shows enough in this next 3 or 4 months, then, great. Then you've got a long-term centre-back for a bit of a knockdown price. But as we say, that he's young, coming into a new league, he might not necessarily be playing for another week or two. So it's a big task for him, and I'm not sure he'll play tomorrow. I think if either of the two are going to play, it's going to be Ben Davies, I'd imagine. But I think Klopp might just err on the side of caution and go with something that we've seen in recent weeks with possibly a return for Fabinho and maybe Henderson alongside him.
Am I right in saying, sorry Matt, am I right in saying that Ben Davies has played against Manchester City before in one of the cup competitions, maybe in the FA Cup?
Quite possibly, yes.
Sure.
Quite possibly.
I think that might be right. But I mean, if that is the case, and I agree. Actually, I think if there is going to be one of them thrown in, it possibly would be Davies, just because he has that little bit more experience, even though it's in a lesser league. And I think obviously he's I don't know how Kabak is in terms of speaking English or anything like that, but I just think it probably would be an easier fit for him to just come straight in and get dropped into that situation. Although like I said, I still possibly don't expect it, but I think of the two, I agree with Gorst. I think he's possibly the most likely.
Yeah, you were spot on with the Preston thing. They lost 3-0 against Manchester City September 2019. Raheem Sterling and Gabriel Jesus and an own goal. So wasn't the best result, but yeah, I suppose it does give him a slight advantage. I mean, we're expecting it to probably be a tight game, aren't we, Gorst? It's one of those that's quite difficult to sort of work out how it's going to go. We know what problems Liverpool have. We know what strengths Manchester City have. They obviously, as you said before, haven't won at Anfield since 2003. Do you think Pep Guardiola will see this almost as an opportunity, not just in this season's title race to put down a marker, but also, to sort of get that off their back, if you like?
Oh, yeah, no question. I think, Guardiola's made no secret of it, has he, really, in saying that Anfield is a place he doesn't like coming to. There was that famous quote from the summer before last, was it, where he called it a bugger of a ground. I mean, I think that was a translation. I'm not sure what the Catalan actual phrase was, but that's what it come back as. And he said on the All or Nothing documentary as well, didn't he, Liverpool's front three, he's scared of them and they are the danger men. So I think he's always had that little bit of concern coming to Anfield, which is understandable given what Liverpool's record was and has been for most of his time as Manchester City manager. But this is very different. This is an Anfield where Liverpool they haven't won since December the 16th. They've lost the last two. That near 4-year record's up in smoke. Liverpool are looking around and the treatment room is jam packed, and there's no Anfield crowd in there to kind of cheer them up. So if Guardiola could have wished for a better case scenario, we probably couldn't have come up with something better than the one he'll face when he comes into town on Sunday. So for him, he's probably got to go out there and say, right, let's put this to bed and do our stuff. And I think if he does try that, because he has been fairly conservative in the past. I mean, Klopp made reference of it today of a game when was it October 2018 when he said Kyle Walker didn't go over the halfway line and it was a 0-0. But I think if Guardiola comes to this one with a bit more adventure and a bit more of time to put his foot on the neck, then I think that will open up spaces for Liverpool to counter and something that Liverpool can use, which they haven't been able to for a good while actually at Anfield, because even for the Tottenham game, which was the last one they won, we all know how Tottenham approached that one, and it's been a while since any team has kind of come and tried to fight fire with fire in Anfield, and normally when teams do, Liverpool end up on the victorious side.
Yeah, we know the problems, Lynchy, that Liverpool have got at the back, and that will leave them a little bit exposed. The opposite side of that, Manchester City have only conceded 13 goals in 21 league matches so far this season. You compare that with Liverpool, who are obviously absolutely fantastic last season. After 21, they'd conceded 14. So City actually a little bit better in that regard than what Liverpool were last season. This is not a team that you want to face when you've only scored one home goal in 4.
No, absolutely. I've watched a little bit of City this season and been really impressed by Ruben Dias. I think the fact that the sort of transformation you've seen in John Stones, I think, says a lot for how good Dias is. He couldn't get near the Manchester City team last season. He looked like he was absolutely finished there. The fact now he looks like a Rolls Royce of a centre half because he's next to Ruben Dias says a lot. I think he's a really high quality centre half. I think comparisons with Virgil van Dijk might be pushing it slightly. I don't think he's sort of at that level, but he won't be far below him, and he's really changed things for them. I think the difference is for Liverpool is that they're not worried about that defensive record just because as you say, City's fixture list has maybe sort of been slightly kind to them of late. It probably helped boost those figures a little bit. And they've not, they don't face an attack like Liverpool's every week. So you could think that Liverpool can possibly get at them. I'm sure they'll be looking to, exploit weaknesses that other sides have. And they're not like we said before. They're not going to come and sit in and sort of rely on their defensive strengths. Are they? City will come and have a go. They'll still be open. and their best form of defence is keeping the ball away from the opposition, and it's something they haven't managed consistently at Anfield because they just get pressed to death and then give it up in dangerous areas, and that's where Liverpool tend to score the goals. So I think it's something to think about, and that Ruben Dias isn't as easily got at as some of City's central defenders in the past. But I do think Liverpool, they shouldn't worry about that too much. I think that the opportunities will be there. It's just a case of taking them, which I think has been one of the biggest issues during this run. Is maybe missing chances as much as not creating them.
Yeah, still only 23, Ruben Dias, which is quite remarkable when you think of the impact he's had this season, Gorsty. There have been comparisons to Van Dijk, as Lynchy says there, but I suppose it's a completely different situation for me, because at City, he's got £200 million worth of defenders alongside him. It's not quite the same situation as what Van Dijk found at Liverpool, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, from what I've seen him, he does look good, but he seems to be much more of a... I don't really know how to articulate it.
I'm struggling to hear that one, Gorst. It's cracking up a little bit for me.
Yeah, I think we've lost Gorst there.
Van Dijk tends to...
No, he's back. He's back now. Sorry,
we
lost you there for a second.
You might have to repeat all that you've just said there, Gorsty, unfortunately.
Yeah, I did see it go off. I mean, Van Dijk tends to be a proactive defender, doesn't he, in terms of spotting the danger before he has to do anything dramatic. I mean, Ruben Dias, I've seen him quite a lot, and he tends to be a last ditch, get you blocking and get your slide tackles in sort of defender. I mean, whether right or wrong, as long as you're keeping the ball out of the net, that's what he's employed to do. And I thought if it wasn't for him against Aston Villa a couple of weeks back, Villa would have definitely taken something from that game. I think I remember one or two where he just takes it off the toe of the striker as he's about to come in and tap it in and shoot. And he's developed really well in a short time at City, and obviously that will only get better the older he gets and the more experience he gets in the Premier League. So it looks like after quite a few attempts, he does look to be the one who solved it. But Laporte as well, he's another one, isn't he? He come in for big money, and he was obviously injured for most of last season, but he looks another quality defender as well. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be reluctant to compare him to Van Dijk like for like, but he's had a similar effect in terms of really shoring up that back line.
Yeah, certainly very impressive so far, and Liverpool are going to have to be clinical. We'll move on though, Lynchy. I'll start with you for the team selector, and we'll go through each of our Liverpool teams. I think Alisson, we're expecting him to be back. Obviously missed the game midweek through illness. Assuming he is back, he'll be in goal. But the real interesting question, I think, is how you line up that defence. I think obviously Robertson and Alexander-Arnold are fairly obvious, but those two in the middle could be interesting for Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, I think he's going to err on the side of the caution. He did suggest, didn't he, today, that there's a possibility that the centre-half signings could be involved. But I just think he's going to err on the side of caution and go with Henderson and Fabinho back there. I think obviously we think that Fabinho is going to be fit for this. So I think putting the two midfielders in there is probably the way he's going to go. And then, just to hope that that's enough to get him through. I think they've both impressed there, haven't they? So I suppose it's not even chancing it, really. It's... They probably deserve to be selected on form as Liverpool's best centre-half pairing at the moment. So, I think that's the way he's going to go.
Yeah, Fabinho back from injury as well, Gorsty. We think, or we assume at this point, that it's a good chance for him to come back in. Would you go with Fabinho and Henderson, or is there any argument at all, do you think, to throw in one of these two new boys?
I mean... It's a difficult one, isn't it, in terms of making your home debut. There's probably not a tougher game to do that in than a visit from Man City. So that's why I'd probably err on the side of the caution against starting either one of them. But I think Fabinho now, I think we just have to accept that he is a centre-back, don't we? So if he plays, then he's centre-back, as frustrating as that might be. But he's had a great season, really, as a centre-back. So if he's fit enough, then, yeah, I'd be playing him. And I probably would just err on the side of caution and throw in Henderson ahead of Ben Davies.
Yeah, I think I'm going along the same lines. And with that being the case in midfield, then it makes it slightly easier. There's not so many options to make, is there? I think I'm going to put Curtis Jones in over James Milner. I think Milner has just played too many matches in a row now and looked absolutely knackered. Would you go along with that, Lynchy, and therefore have Wijnaldum, Thiago and Curtis Jones, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it is time to call on Curtis Jones. I was really surprised, to be honest, to not see him in the starting lineup against Brighton. He's played well whenever he's been brought in. Milner must be very close to sort of the red zone given his age, and obviously he can occasionally pick up those muscle injuries. Whenever he's sort of got one, it's when you've thought, I'm surprised he's still in the starting 11 when he's been in it for quite a few games consecutively. So I think you've just got to be really, careful with him. You don't want to lose another player to injury. So I think Curtis Jones, you can back him to come in and do a sensible job in there. He's really switched on defensively these days. And then you've got Milner as an option there. He's versatile. He can come into different sort of situations and he'd be a really good option off the bench. So I think that 3 is the one I would go with.
Naby Keita there as well. We think Gorsty, I think he's back in time. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain an option as well, but both of those players sort of come with their own risks, don't they?
Yeah, full house for me. I'd go with Curtis Jones as well. I was shocked that he never played against Brighton, and I was even more shocked that he didn't get on earlier than he did. Milner. He's a fantastic squad player, isn't he, for his experience and his know-how. But I think with the injuries that Liverpool have had, he's kind of been overplayed, and it's just had a little bit of a. He hasn't been a standout player. Let's perhaps put it that way. But for me, Jones has to play. He's one of the few in this Liverpool squad, maybe only him and Keita actually, who are prepared to carry the ball and take people on and try and bring defenders out of positions, because teams kind of let Liverpool have the ball in front of them, especially at Anfield, and they just say break us down, and Liverpool, for all the passing and the crossing and whatever else, they haven't been able to do that. You've seen Liverpool can open teams up when Jones is prepared to have a run. I'm thinking about the goal against Tottenham, the first one. Salah scores it, but it kind of opens up because Jones has a dribble into the heart of the defence. And then again against West Ham, Jones, it was his run that opened up West Ham for the space for Salah to shoot, wasn't it? So I'd be putting Jones in ahead of Milner, and Thiago and Wijnaldum kind of get to continue their roles as well.
I wonder actually whether, in light of what Jurgen said today about sort of he didn't like the speed of passing and stuff, is that whether he regrets slightly not using Jones against Brighton, having those fresh legs in the middle and the ability to sort of pick up pockets of space, and also he's got a really nice pass on him to find in other players. I think he might slightly regret that one. I think that's why I sort of see him maybe looking to put it right against Manchester City, and thinking having some freshness in there and his sort of youthful enthusiasm might really sort of give Liverpool a massive lift in there.
I think that there's been an argument that without Milner in that midfield and without Henderson as well, there's maybe a lack of leadership in that midfield area. Would that be a risk at all, do you think, Lynch? Or do you think that's sort of not a myth, but maybe over-exaggerated with the fact that Henderson isn't there?
I think you miss Henderson's. We've seen the videos, haven't we? The talking and the way he encourages players, and he sort of switched on to what everyone's job is at every moment of the game. And I think having that in the centre of the park rather than a little bit further back is possibly quite helpful. But and I think that's possibly why he wants Milner in there, he's the vice captain, and if you don't have Milner, then if you don't have Henderson in, then it's great to have Milner in there. But I think sometimes you've got to think about the impact of other things, and this is what it's like for managers, isn't it? Constantly balancing, several considerations at once. And I think, like we said, the legs issue here with Milner is probably sort of outweighs what you're talking about in terms of having vocal leadership in there. And I think you probably get more from Curtis in this game, even though you might have to give up having that vice captain in the centre of the park. I mean, there is, like, we touched upon it, didn't we? There is always the option that he goes and pushes Henderson back in there, and maybe says to Ben Davies, just have a go at this. Then you faced Man City before, and he has Fabinho alongside him, say, because whoever is going to be Ben Davies' partner or Kabak's partner, if he's the one who's chosen, it will be someone they've never played with before anyway. So it's, I suppose that's not going to be sort of something to worry about, is it? It's so maybe, just maybe, you would think about that for this game, just to get Henderson back in midfield. But I think I still sort of fall on the side of what we said, which is to throw Curtis in there, get some fresh legs, and maybe Milner can come on late in the game and hopefully change things or see out a 4-0 win.
Yeah, I think that might be a little bit optimistic, but yeah, it's good to sort of have these conversations and have these options, isn't it? I suppose that's sort of facilitated by the fact that there are a couple of centre-backs at the club, but I suppose the one area of the pitch where you wouldn't want to make a change is up front. Sadio Mane, we think, is back, and he presumably will be up there with Firmino and Salah, Ghosty.
Yeah, you guess so. I mean, the kind of reserve list isn't exactly stellar cast at the moment, is it? Minamino's obviously gone to Southampton. Diogo Jota's the big one who continues to get himself fit, and then Divock Origi, who sadly it looks like his days could be numbered come the summer, and Shaqiri, who's not played a lot of football, who hasn't done too badly, to be fair to him, but yeah, I mean, Liverpool's front three remains kind of the big guns, aren't they? And it's just a real shame that Diogo Jota did get that injury, because when they've struggled for an impact player off the bench, or even just the ability to rotate here and there, they just haven't really been able to do it. I mean, Origi started that game against Burnley, didn't he? And who knows what happens if he goes and puts that one in towards the end of the first half, but he didn't. But if Jota had been fit and Jota would have started ahead of Origi, it just gives you a lot more confidence in the fact that Liverpool can go and score, because am I right in thinking they haven't done that since West Brom, still at Anfield? That's gone back to 27th of December. So, yeah, I mean, let's just hope that Sadio Mane is back and firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, Jota, of course, played a big part at the Etihad as well, didn't he, in that 4-2-4 formation from Liverpool, but not really on the table, is it, this time, Lynch? I think we just have to assume it's going to be a 4-3-3 because Minamino no longer at the club, and Origi, as Gorst says, just not quite performing at the right level at this moment in time. Yeah,
that's it. I just don't think the backups have got any case to sort of start in this one. If you can get the front three together, then you have to do it. I think you saw Shaqiri sort of pushed out wide against Brighton, and I just don't think that works at all. I think if you're going to use him, and we saw this at West Ham, is when he gets into central areas and he can pick up passes. He's got runners ahead of him. I think that works. Funnily enough, actually, I don't think that works so much when he's got Firmino in front of him, because Firmino likes to come into those deeper areas and they end up picking the ball up in similar positions and having no one in a central position going in behind. So unfortunately for Shaqiri, the best sort of configuration in attack for him is to sort of be in a 4-2-3-1 in a central position with Origi maybe ahead of him rather than Firmino. So, and he doesn't seem to fit in out wide. So I just think, yeah, there's no case to be made at all really to start anything but the main front three.
Yeah, no, in complete agreement with you there. Just before we finish, we'll do our match predictions. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. I know it's not the best result in the world for Liverpool, but just think if it gets to that 60-minute mark and City are level, I think they will probably just shut up shop and take that, to be honest, given the buffer that they have at the top. Gorsty, are you any more optimistic that Liverpool could win, or are you going to go along similar lines?
Yeah, I think so, unfortunately. I mean, I normally rival Mark Lawrenson for the guesses and saying Liverpool are going to win everything, but it's difficult to make a case against the team who are coming into 13 straight wins, top of the league. Liverpool have obviously got the massive injury list and no supporters, so yeah, I mean, it'd be great if they could kind of give themselves a massive shot in the arm with a win, but I think a draw is the realistic one, yeah.
And Lynchy, what are you going to say for it?
Do you know what? I think with it being Manchester City, I think Liverpool are going to be bang up for it. You know, fans aren't in, but it's still Anfield. The familiarity of the areas on the pitch and things like that all play a part. I think City, defensively a lot better this season, but I do think there's a possibility when Aguero isn't in their side that you can stop them scoring. I think, I'm not massively convinced by Jesus still, and I know his goal record at City is absolutely ridiculous, to be honest. But when I saw it the other day, I was surprised because I don't think he's a top-end quality player. I think the way City play sets him up for tap-ins quite a lot, and obviously you've got to get there. But I still don't think, if they were relying on him for any period, I don't think he's that level of that, top level like Aguero. So I think that's, back Liverpool to maybe get a clean sheet. I think it's, whether the front three can get firing. I think possibly City will maybe hopefully take them slightly lightly, and maybe that will open up a few spaces to Liverpool, and they can maybe sort of score one early and score one late and get 2-0 win.
Oh, very optimistic. I think you're right on Gabriel Jesus, to be honest. I think since he signed for Manchester City, he's in terms of expected goals, performing 15 under where he should be. So, I mean, that is not even really an average striker in terms of finishing. But yeah, certainly Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool could do with him missing another couple of chances, I think, at the weekend. But that just about brings us to the end of today's podcast. We'll be back, of course, with the next Blood Red podcast on Monday, looking back, hopefully, at a win for Liverpool. But for myself and Gorsty, more likely a draw. We think plenty more to come before and after that match, of course, as well, too. For now, though, from myself, Matt Addison, from Paul Gorst, and from David Lynch, until next time here on the Blood Red channel, thank you for watching and listening, and goodbye for now.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool